Hi, welcome to the first Eskrima vlog or Eskrima podcast. I'm not sure which one to call it, but just trying to work on getting regular content out. So we're starting this new channel because editing all the training and teaching that I do takes a lot, and I'm always driving, commuting to work and things like that. So I figured start talking about Eskrima from the point of view of just what's going on and everything, and I wanted to talk about motivation first. So, I've been on a bunch of podcasts and things like that, and usually, why did you start? And, I was little when I started. I was 6. When I went to class and had to wear a class shirt and learn the salutes and all that stuff. I was apparently doing it younger than that as playtime with my dad, but I was younger. And I was 6 years old, and the motivation at that time was you want to be cool like your dad. Honestly, I didn't know how important having somebody like Grandmaster Angel Caballas in my backyard was when he would come and visit. Didn't know how important it would be to have Max Sarmento, or when my Uncle Dan Inosano would come and visit. Had no idea. It was just my dad and his students, my uncles, other people, monoms coming and training, and most of the time I'm playing in the backyard. Occasionally I would swing a stick around with everyone else because, but at 4, 5, and 6, how long is your attention span? So I do know that I showed up to most of the class, was not required to do all of the class, right? But my first motivation was being like dad. And then eventually, get older. It wasn't until I was in my teens or pre-teens that I was really aware of all the instructors and what that meant, and what my dad's position in the community was, what that meant, right? But at that time, I'd already been training 5-6 years, and it was about getting good, and it wasn't about self-defense. I wasn't worried about that. I did get bullied when I was younger during this time, but I wasn't allowed to fight. The school board was worried because they knew who my dad was. They didn't want me getting in fights, being bullied. My dad didn't want me to become a bully. So, in turn, I didn't fight back when people would bully me. I was more concerned with getting better at the Eskrima. I don't know if that was so that my dad would give me more validation or, acknowledgement. I think it was more about it was fun, and I was playing warrior. That was what was cool. So, it was pretty cool time, right? So, sorry about the shakiness of the video. It's the first time I'm trying this. I'm gonna post it anyways, even though it's all shaky and everything. And so my motivation changed. It's first it's be like dad, then it's make dad proud. And then it was about getting as good as I could get. That's probably my later teens, right? 17, 18. And I become a guru about that time. I graduated from high school. This is 1992 by this time. And I'm a Katalunan guru. I'd already been teaching. And started, working at the school, teaching. Eventually, I was tasked with certain things. And so to prove my ability, not just as an Eskrimador, but as a teacher, and then as someone who's part of a bigger organization, right? So that time, is when I moved away from, just being as good as I could be to doing the right thing for the community, for the art, to spread the art. In fact, that's pretty much what it was all the way up until my father passed. The day that my father passed, I had spoken to him, and said, "Son, I'm proud of you," and all these things. And I said, "That's great, Dad." Something to the effect of, but I want you to know I'm doing it not to make you proud, but because it's the right thing to do. And he respected that. We had a really good conversation. And as soon as he passed away, I went back to doing it to make him proud. So my motivations have changed over time, and that passion was there. What played into it, though, as far as my training, because I really have not taken any time off from teaching and or training since I became an instructor. I didn't take a pause to do something else. Like I didn't want to go and learn dance or become an engineer or anything like that. I taught. Sometimes, especially when the last year my father was alive, I think I was teaching 4 or 5 days a week in 2 or 3 different locations, because I was teaching in Santa Cruz and I was also teaching in the South Bay area as well. And then I would have my father invited in to come and guest teach on occasion, and he'd evaluate my students. He hated it because I don't really care about titles, honestly. I don't really care about the ranks and the things like that, and I don't care. So he goes into the class and he goes, "You got the best students in class in the system," because he goes around and teaches all these other people. And I don't know if he was just giving me acknowledgement or giving me encouragement or whatever, but that's what he said. And he goes, "None of them wear uniforms. None of them are ranked properly, and they don't obey any of the etiquette in class other than the salute." I go, "Yeah, I know." And he goes, "You have to fix that." So, doing what was right at the time was more about doing what was right for the art, as opposed to, the different things that proper etiquette, proper uniform, proper ranking also provide value to the individual practitioners, the instructors, and the system as a whole. And I ignored a lot of that simply because I was more interested in the capability of my students, as opposed to whether or not they had the right costume on and knew the right, secret words and secret handshakes and all that stuff. But he was right, and I before he passed, he got to see me change back and make sure that the students were properly attired, had the proper etiquette, were properly acknowledged and ranked, and that's the way I try to keep it now, right? And I guess my motivation today in teaching martial arts is teaching Eskrima, and I really don't look at it as I'm teaching Eskrima so much anymore. Like I teach a way. You could call it the Inayan way, you could call it the Inayan method, or but like my students, when they come in and they start doing Eskrima, they're Eskrimadors. They switch. They're not a martial artist. I don't treat them that way. I don't talk to it about it that way per se. It's you're an Eskrimador, which is someone who's practicing Filipino martial arts, an art that was used in military action by a national government of the United States in World War II. And then, entire infantry units were using Filipino martial arts, Eskrima, right? That's the identity that we work with from there. But to be an Inayan Eskrimador is different. There are only 3 people that I ever know that have any kind of what could be called written documentation as to being called Inayan Eskrimadors. Because like a guru is not the same thing in the Inayan system as actually being called an Eskrimador. That was a different thing. When my dad, Suro, right, he put his hand on your shoulder or he addressed you directly and says, "You're an Inayan Eskrimador," man, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. It's not just that you do Filipino martial arts now. Now you do it the Inayan way, in action, and not just techniques, but like the fighting, right, and just the way that you approach that experience, right? So, I don't really look at it as teaching Eskrima so much as I'm working with fellow Eskrimadors, and hopefully I'll be able to call them Inayan Eskrimadors at some point. Not very many have. A lot of them are, Inayan Gurus, and they're practitioners of Inayan Eskrima. But an Inayan Eskrimador is, it's the code of conduct. It's the art itself. It's the way of doing the art, the way of practicing the art. Way of conducting yourself. Although my dad never used the term, he adhered to a lot of Filipino principles and etiquette and traditions, such as amor proprio. So, the motivation today for me, I suppose, is very different than my father's motivation. He was given the motivation of preserve and propagate Filipino martial arts, especially the he had learned from his teachers, and for most of his students, he made it preserve and propagate Filipino martial arts, specifically the Inayan system of Eskrima, right? That's the only art that he ever created. A lot of people call it Inayan Eskrimador, and it's not totally improper to call it that, although I feel that way sometimes. But, you know, the system part of that whole thing, Inayan system of Eskrima, is pretty significant, right? You know, like, and the thing is if you practice Inayan Eskrimador, Inayan system of Eskrima, you gotta know who the founder of the system is, right? You have to know the motto of the system, and you should know what Eskrima is, right? And Eskrima is not fighting with sticks, or fighting with swords, or fighting with knives, or a lot of the other representations that people give. It's none of those things, and it's all of those things. Inayan Eskrima specifically, or in general, Filipino martial arts, Kali or Nis, is a methodology to prevail under adversity, right? And especially modern day, you know, I had a student come up to me once. He goes, you know, did all these things, the training we call lock and walk, reflex training, and all that stuff. And he goes, you know, I always understood that it's fighting ability and everything else, but he goes, he's one of my gurus, and he goes, but it was really helpful when I'm sitting in a panel interview, because the training gives him scope as to like what stress really is. And normally you're very nervous and stressed, and I've been nervous and stressed during you know, panel interviews, right, and made mistakes in my interviews, right, for just day jobs and things like that. But it was like the lock and block, like the reflex training. You know, they're getting their hits in, and I'm doing my defenses, and I'm starting to get stressed, and I can just think of at least Suro. Now he's referring to me now, right? Suro, you know, he's like at least Suro's not trying to hit me, so it helped him give scope. So Eskrima is about being able to prevail under adversity, not just physical adversity, but also psychological adversity, right? So because life throws you a lot of curveballs, and you know, I honestly believe, like, you know, what I do and what I practice, what I teach isn't martial arts. It's a way of dealing with conflict, right? You become a different kind of creature over time, and that creature is one that can thrive in adversity. That's not martial arts. Everybody teaches martial arts. Anybody can teach you to punch or kick or swing a stick, or, you know, cut or disarm a knife, or, you know, all the things that people associate with martial arts, right? That anybody can teach you that. There's a lot of different things, you know. That's really just what martial arts is, right? How you do it, why you do it, you know, who is it for, and when, and how to use it in its different facets, like we were talking about right now, are different. And that's my motivation, is to be able to pass that on, right? To be able to show that this rich tradition, you know, that's been not only proven in the battlefield and on the street, but in the hearts and minds of its practitioners that truly believe and feel for the art. And it's not just an activity or a way to connect with heritage or a social thing, but is, you know, embodies a physical movement, a warrior ethos, an intellectual pursuit, right? That's what I teach now, and that's my motivation. So, you know, the other thing I want to talk about was teaching yesterday. So I was teaching at my normal Los Gatos class on Saturdays. You got a mixture of kids and adults, some that are doing multiple, they're doing their martial arts program at the school that's more of a mix of Korean, Taekwondo, and kickboxing, and boxing, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Eskrima. So they do that program, and you know, the black belts, they have to do that. So it's early there, you know, 8 in the morning for the black belt candidates that are coming up this year for 2023. You know, they're going to get their pre-test this month and their full test in September after the Monk Summer Memorial. It's happening the weekend before, the 23rd one, and then I taught my class from 11 to 12, and then I taught my Dumont class after that. But like, I was thinking about that class when we were building towards the ability to participate in reflex drills both on the giving and the receiving side, the feeder and the receiver, right? And, I was reminded of a saying, like if he's hungry for a hit, you got to hit him, right? Kind of thing. It's a kind of saying that Grandmaster Angel Kabbalist would use, right? And, the benefit of learning how to hit. We spend a lot of time in martial arts, traditional martial arts, learning how to defend, right? Whereas you look at combat martial arts, right? Combat sports like, say, fencing, or judo, or wrestling, or taekwondo, as an example, or any kind of combat sport, really, not just the Olympic ones, not just boxing and fencing and judo and wrestling, right? But also like MMA or boxing, right? They spend a lot of time attacking. And we forget sometimes the value of attacking. Now, that's not the same thing as an amara, right? Or a florete, or whatever terminology you're using for striking pattern, right? Because striking pattern by rote is nice, but it's not purposeful. When a boxer approaches the idea of an attack, they might throw a couple of straights, down both pipes. But what they're doing is knowing that the opponent's going to either defend by maneuver or defend by cover or some other kind of means. They're going to understand what that is. But they're also letting the opponent feel as though the threat really is coming from straight on. That changes when you bring in the hook and the uppercut, right? And then you're moving and you're changing angle and you're doing other things. So attacking is more than just remembering a combination. It's not just jab, cross, hook, and that's you've got attack. If that's working against your opponent, great, you should totally use it, but like that's also an indicator of the caliber of your opponent. If something as rudimentary as a jab, cross, hook, though very skillfully done, is still not a high caliber opponent if that's the thing that you're using to penetrate them, right? Like they're talking about this right now in the UFC. Nate Diaz just fought. He's talking about being a boxer and how this other boxer, can't even remember this kid's name. He's just like he became a YouTube boxer and now he's in MMA. Doesn't really matter. He'll be a flash in the pan in all likelihood anyways, right? But Nate Diaz is talking about, boxing and how that works and how MMA fighters that are not trained in boxing just don't really understand it and they can't really stand against him. And I can't. It brings me back to the first fight with Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, where in terms of boxing and that sweet science, right? Jab cross, right? He basically beat McGregor with jab cross. Like the first combo or second combo you might learn in any boxing school, true boxing school. I'm not talking about going to a 9 rounds or some cardio boxing thing. That's not the same thing. Although the coaches there might be boxing instructors, it's not the same thing as actually learning boxing, right? That's a whole different thing. But we were doing our reflex training on Saturday and teaching the adults and kids how to receive and hit back and work with stance and footwork and things like that. And I really enjoyed it. I like to see I have students that don't progress very fast because they only show up once a week. I got others that continue to progress on a regular basis because they show up regularly several times a week, and I get to see students that show up or teach, like Patrick, my protege, who shows up 5-6 times a week for training, and you get to see that incremental growth from them as you're consistent and show discipline and perseverance through teaching, leading from front, so that they know what to follow, right? And so it was pretty exciting. I had a good time teaching that. I have a student, his name is Alan. He's been with me for, I don't know, more than 10 years, I'd assume. And he can only come on Saturdays. And so as an advanced student, we have the third level is essentially like a second degree black belt, essentially, if I'm comparing to other systems currently today. To us, it was like a big deal. Third level in the 9th system was kind of a big deal. That's when you go from being a basic student to an advanced student. You're supposed to get your basic diploma, all that kind of stuff. So I feed him lock and block, which is faster, more vicious and ferocious, harder, right? And you see the eyes round out on these kids. And even one of the adults, I think I saw, was like, whoa, that was crazy, right? And then, prior to doing that, I showed it with one of my newer students, and I think it was Reedy that I used, who's only been with us for about a year. maybe. Very short period of time, either way. And he's performing well for his time, right? Like he can replace his feet. He can get his blocks up there, and his hand placement, his stick placement is acceptable, right? For his rank, it's all I can hope for, right? And he's doing great. And everyone's like, wow, okay, that's cool. I said, that's where you start, right? That's the first stage. You're going to get to this. And so a lot of them aren't at that level yet. And then I take in Alan and I go, and this is where we're trying to get to, right? And even Alan, though, he's very, very good, and he's by every respect an advanced student in the United System of Eskrima, that if my father were to see him, would say, yeah, that guy's an advanced student. I've seen that guy fight on full contact stick fights. He actually blocks. I've seen other people that have trained from my family's lineage, but not through the Inayan System of Eskrima or the Inayan Training Organization. They're out there with my family name, and I'm watching them fight. They can't block anything. So, you know, it's different. It's a different standard. We're not the same. We're not the same. But to see the look on the student's face when you say, okay, I'm trying to hit this person as hard, or really hard anyways, not necessarily as hard as fast as I can, but pretty damn hard and fast. And it's not a pattern, it's random, and I'm deliberately trying to foul his defenses, right? And then I look at the student and says, that's where we're trying to get to. But you also have to understand, that isn't a fight. That's just to get ready to be able to fight, right? And it's going back to the motivations. This is what motivates me now, is taking someone from not confident, right, to confident, not capable to capable. Right? I don't really care if they memorize the techniques. Unless they're going to become an instructor, they can, you know, really do the techniques however they need to do them to make them work for them, right? You know, if they can't do it aesthetically right. And my father was more like, well, he can protect himself so he can get promoted. I totally agree with that sentiment. I don't agree with, well, he can defend himself with the art. It kind of looks like what we're doing, and he's effective, but he looks terrible, and he's kind of slow, right? But he's still capable. That's good enough to be a practitioner, good enough to be an Eskrimador, but not necessarily good enough to be a guru, because you're going to pass on that poor ability, right? So it's that bringing that capability and bringing that standard. So I don't have the motivation of preserve and propagate Filipino martial arts, especially the Inayan system of Eskrima, or the tradition that comes from the Inay family, which is where that name comes from, right? It is to deepen the understanding and capability of practitioners of Filipino martial arts who would be earning and have earned the right to be called an Eskrimador, and are on their way, if not already there, to becoming an Inayan Eskrimador. I hope you like this first shaky video thing. I'm going to have to fix my mount on this thing as I commute out to Stockton today. You have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.